Welcome to the Carolina Real Estate Insider, the podcast where we break down the news of the day affecting real estate in the greater Charlotte area. I'm your host, Realtor Kathy Smith, and today we are discussing those who are successfully circumventing junk fees placed upon rental housing, such as pet rent. How are they avoiding the 35, 45, or even higher fees per pet levied by landlords each month? Well, it's by the abuse of the service animal or emotional support animal laws. Stay tuned as we unpack this strategy in today's episode. Well, we all love our pets. They're a huge part of our families. But with the rising cost of housing and associated fees, people are finding creative ways to reduce cost. There are organizations who will certify your pet as an emotional support animal or a service animal, and that'll help you to save a few $100s each year. Pay the fee, fill out the form online, and you're all set, right? Well, let's look at this from a broader perspective. There are 500,000 legitimate service animals supporting Americans right now, and maybe even more that are not being reported. For every service animal, there's a human with a need to have them. It is said that less than 1% of Americans living with a disability has a service animal. Well, what about the remaining 99%? The cost to have a service animal is too high for them, or an animal trained for their specific needs is not available at the current time. Well, that could be the reason. So, what does that have to do with your pet? Claiming a pet as a service animal is illegal in several states. And, well, I don't know about you, but I've come across several emotional support animals that I've had to protect my puppy from in the past. Aggressive behavior or destructive tendencies like tearing up carpet or eliminating indoors creates a huge problem for those with disabilities who truly rely upon service animals for their independence. Today, I'm joined by service animal advocates and those who utilize service animals in their daily lives that are also champions for those who need them. Julie Rydstrand of ArticCross Samoyeds, Dr. Veronica Morris, and Bradley Morris of Psychiatric Service Dog Partners. So let's start with Dr. V. Can you shed light on the consequences of this fraudulent practice of passing off a pet as a service animal or emotional support animal?
Sure. I think the best place to start is actually to define the terms emotional support animal and service animal. So, both emotional support animals and service dogs help someone with a disability. That's where they have the most in common. The biggest difference is that service dogs are trained to do something to help that person with their disability, whereas emotional support animals help just by being there. Additionally, service animals are granted rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act and under the Fair Housing Act to live in no pet housing and access public facilities like stores, restaurants, taxi cabs, and hospitals. Emotional support animals are covered under the Fair Housing Act to have access in no pet housing. However, they do not have the right to go out into stores or restaurants or any of those places. So the level of training required for a service animal and emotional support animal is different. Now, it's important to remember that service dogs can be trained by the disabled handler or trained by a program. And speaking of the Fair Housing Act, under that act, assistance animal, the term assistance animal, includes both service dogs and emotional support animals. But service dogs have different procedures than what are called assistance animals other than service dogs. And Brad's going to talk hopefully a little bit more about the laws in a little bit. I think it's important to remember that emotional support animals can act like pets so long as they aren't disruptive or destructive. So they can't destroy an apartment or they will get, you have to pay the damages of the destroying of the apartment. They can't bark all day long, but they're not held to the same behavioral standard as service dogs. So an emotional support animal barking at another dog is not something that would be unexpected. Whereas with a service animal, it would be unexpected. And you can't always tell if someone is disabled and needs an assistance animal. We might not be aware of their situation. So, all that said, to get to your question, you asked about the consequences. Well, I think most people who claim that they have assistance animals have disabilities, but they don't have the education about what that means or how to go about it. And the consequences of incorrectly identifying your animal as an emotional support animal or a service dog are it makes landlords suspicious of real service animals and emotional support animals, which will make it harder for people to rent with those types of animals. And it also, that mindset of being suspicious of these types of assistance animals can be passed along to legislators, who can then try to make laws that curtail the rights of people with emotional support animals or service animals.
Wow, it really truly is not just about breaking the rules. I mean, there's serious legal consequences here. So, Bradley Morris, is someone deeply involved in advocacy. Can you talk about your organization, Psychiatric Dog Partners, and how you help those with service animals in regards to housing?
Sure, thanks for asking. Veronica and I founded PSDP with some fellow disabled friends about a dozen years ago, and it's run as an all volunteer nonprofit run exclusively by disabled people to fill in the very large gaps that we found in education, support, and advocacy around psychiatric service dogs. So, since then, we've been involved with expert witnessing and filing briefs with the Supreme Court. Changing lots of laws like the flying law, forming a nonprofit coalition, and we've helped hundreds of thousands of people learn about service dogs. So when it comes to housing, we have two main resources on our website at psych.dog. That's psych.dog. So for healthcare professionals who need to write housing letters and the assistance animal users who need the letters, we have a page on service dog letter templates. For assistance animal users and landlords, we have a housing page which walks you through how the accommodation procedure is supposed to work and explains things like how service animals, in particular, don't need paperwork for housing. So we think that the law itself is pretty good. We find that the most problems come about because people don't know or don't follow the law. So when the problem is not in the law, more laws we don't think are the answer. We think that it's about education and enforcement of the existing laws. So the primary way that landlords and tenants can protect themselves and respect everyone's rights is to educate themselves. And on that note, if you'd like, I could give you a crash course on what the assistance dog or assistance animal housing laws are.
Well, you know what? That's a great segue. Let's go right into it. So tell us a little bit about that, Brad.
All right, well, so there are federal laws and there are state laws about assistance animals, but the state laws can't take away the rights granted by federal laws. So we can look at the federal laws first. I'll just note that North and South Carolina do extend the rights of service animal users. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, has a 2020 guidance document on how to assess requests for assistance animal accommodations under the Fair Housing Act. We have this 2020 guidance document linked on our site at psych.dog/housing, so you can see it for yourself. But I'll warn you that the HUD document is long and it looks complicated. So that's why we actually made the rules easier to follow on our site by making flowcharts and click-through surveys, so you can use either way to figure out how the laws apply to a particular situation. But here's the rundown on how the federal laws work overall. These laws apply to most housing situations, but you can find any of the exceptions, the few exceptions, on our site. So when it's a dog, the housing laws for assistance animals start out basically the same for housing as when a service animal user goes to the store. So if it's obvious it's a service dog, allow it. There's nothing you need to do because you already know. But if it's not, as in most cases, then you can ask two questions to figure out whether it's a service animal. First, is the animal required because of a disability? Second, what work or task has the animal been trained to perform? If they say yes to the first question, they need the animal for their disability, and give you a reasonable answer to the second, that's it. They're in. No more questions, no documentation from them, no pet fees. You just make it clear in your paperwork that they have a service dog. Now, if the animal is not trained to do work or tasks, or it's not a dog, but it is an animal that's commonly kept in a home, then the accommodation procedure evolves. It involves establishing that they have a disability and that the animal helps with that disability. that's where the letter from a healthcare professional comes into play. But again, only if the situation isn't obvious. If it's someone you know personally and you know their situation beforehand, you don't need to go to these lengths, but usually you do. So just know that you can't pry into anyone's diagnosis of what exactly their disability is. That's private information. You just need to know whether they're disabled and have a disability-related need for the animal. But as far as the online assistance animal certificates go, you don't have to treat those as reliable. The paperwork can come from a telehealth healthcare professional, but they would then have to have personal knowledge of their patient. So they get you that letter either through telehealth or through traditional means from their provider, and they are good to go. So that's the crash course, but and you can recap that federal part of what you need at psych.dog/housing. But if you'd like to put a bow on it, I could cover the tiny bit that our state laws add to this, plus what the penalties are, but that's up to you.
Well, maybe that would be a great recap towards the end of all this when we start talking about landlords. But I've actually been to your website, and it's a really great resource. So for all of our audience out there, be sure to check out their website. We'll drop the website URL across the screen here and put it in the description for those of us catching it on the podcast. So, but let's shift a little bit and talk about what a real service animal should look like. So service animals are restricted to small horses and dogs, but emotional support animals could be any type of domesticated animal. But for sake of our discussion today, let's just talk about dogs. Now, while a service dog could be a mixed breed or a purebred, there are some innate qualities that they all must have. It's said that up to 70% of dogs who are initially chosen as service animals don't ultimately get the job. So, Julie, can you speak to what it is that an animal needs to make that cut?
In my case, I'm not in the Fab 4 group. So the Fab 4 group is golden retrievers, Labrador retrievers, German shepherds sometimes. Basically, the dogs that you normally see with a lot of different people, dogs that are traditionally guide dogs, etc. With more people using service dogs, we are branching out to dogs that fit individuals as opposed to fit a greater variety of people. A new service dog person probably should stick with the easygoing golden retriever or Labrador. Someone like me who's been raised with my breed, my family's been in them since the 1940s. I picked the unicorns out of my own breeding program and use those. Typically speaking, my breed is very independent. They're not particularly amenable to always doing what the human wants. Well, for me, that's a good thing because I don't listen well. I need a dog that can disobey me and say, no, we're not doing that. You're wrong. And they have to be strong enough emotionally to do that. You have to have a dog that's persistent. You have to have a dog that's easygoing. Obviously, manners are a big deal. In my breed is extremely people friendly. And so the first thing I do is I teach them to ignore people. Um, they like me. They don't like anybody else. I mean, they're fine with other people. They're not going to be upset with other people, but they're mine. And that's not common for my breed. Now, golden retrievers love everybody. Labrador retrievers love everybody. My breed loves everybody, but my breed is not particularly loyal. And so it truly takes a unicorn. Um, it's a lot of, I mean, I've had times where I've been looking for service dogs. I've got probably a dozen people on my list. It can take me 5 years to find the right dog for the right person. It took me 5 years worth of breeding to find the right next dog for me. And then the next 2 litters had 4 more dogs that worked. And so those were dogs that I was able to place out. But I find, as a breeder, I find my biggest problem is the number of people who don't understand that not just any puppy will do. You should be buying from a breeder who has high standards for their breeding program. They should be doing health checks on their adults. They should have 20 generations of health checks. Nice enough to have one generation, but as far as temperament and hips and elbows and eyes go, it's a big deal not to have things fail that you could easily forestall. I trained a dog for someone else at one point, and it was a nice shelter dog, wonderful dog. It only got to work for 9 months because it developed PRA. PRA is progressive retinal atrophy. It basically went blind. And it's something in my breed that we test for, so we don't ever produce it. I don't know of a dog that's produced has had PRA in probably 20 years. I mean, it's easily been that long since we started doing the DNA testing. It's made life a whole lot easier. And so when people are looking for a service dog, they've got to look for dogs that are coming from breeders that are doing more than just producing puppies. They have to be tested. They have to be strong, have good, strong temperaments. They have to be able to not engage with other dogs. And, training a dog to do those things is a lot of work.
Well, and
2
Julie,
years.
I was say, Julie, I can chip in here on this one because the audience may be aware and may know, may have actually met Darling Loki, my baby, and he initially started out his life slated to become your service dog, Julie, but
Yeah.
he failed because he was just too nice.
Yeah, he was way too engaging for me to want to work with him. I have a puppy right now whose favorite place is under my chair. That's a dog I'll work with because he's already decided I'm his person. And will he fulfill all the duties? Maybe, maybe not. I have one service dog right now in my home who is only a service dog at home. He's not suitable to work out of my house. One of the things he does is I'm diabetic. He does a foot check. So he'll check my feet and tell me if there's anything off. He will notice something off on my body 2 to 3 days before it comes, which is a heck of a warning system. So I
That's
know, he's goosing me and I'm like, okay, what's going on here, buddy?
Something's up.
And,
Yeah.
and a pimple, but I mean, still, he told me it
Hey,
was there. Mom,
it's
there's a
enough.
thing. There's a
Yeah.
thing, you know,
Yeah.
and so, not all service dogs are necessarily suitable for the public. Doesn't make them not a service dog. It just makes
Right.
them not a public facing service dog. And, you know, trying to
Well, and
train that task is difficult.
so, Julie, let's talk about that because you mentioned a public facing service dog. When you talk about that versus the people that we see out in public with a dog in a vest, what's the difference there?
Well, a lot of it comes right down to just behavior, the level of training. Um, you know, for me at this point in my disability, I send my dogs out to get their first obedience, manners, etc. kind of training. It takes a lot of the load off of me, and I'm willing to pay someone money to do that for me. And usually we do 2 to 3 months worth of basic manners. We usually get a title or two, just because I find that dogs who are going to be working in public, going to a dog show is a great thing to teach a dog to ignore dogs. Works really well. And if they can work at a dog show, they can work pretty much anywhere. It's noisy, it's loud, and lots of kerfluffle going on. There's other dogs barking, there's big machines blowing air, there's loudspeakers going, there's, hundreds if not thousands of people. And so for me, that's how I put a foundational training on my dogs. I run into a fair number of non-service dogs that are supposed service dogs, and literally the only way I can tell, behavior's bad. If they're pulling their owner, to me, they either have not trained appropriately and are not ready to be public facing, or it's just not really a service dog. um, I try not to call out people, and I totally will duck around the corner into another aisle to get away from them, because I'm not into confronting anybody. That's their business, that's not mine. Long as they don't try to engage with my dog, we're okay, you know.
And can I add also that the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is now out of the housing realm and into the public access realm, the Americans with Disabilities Act says that if a dog is disruptive or destructive, they can be asked to leave. So if you see a dog that's marked as a service dog and it's barking, biting, peeing, pooping, growling, any of those things, the store legally has the right to ask that animal to leave. And it could be a legitimate service dog that's having a bad day. I mean, dogs have bad days like humans do. Or it could be someone who is taking a pet out as a service animal. But there are those protections for businesses that if the dog is not behaving, they can be kicked out.
Generally, I find with most service dog handlers, they're harder on their dogs than anyone else. My dog has a bad day, we're out of here. Um, I'm not walking through Walmart with a dog that's having a bad day. It's just not worth it to me to do that to the dog. Bad experiences from for dogs lead to more bad experiences, and so it's always good to stop it right before, see it before it happens if you can, and take care appropriately. I I don't go out in public without my service dog very often anymore. I occasionally will use a service human. I will say the service human is not as helpful as a service
Oh,
dog is. Just saying.
yeah,
Um, he's great. He's great. I love him. But the
yeah.
service dog is very happy to do the job, and the service human says,
Mhm.
my back is starting to hurt now.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah,
the
they
dog
complain,
never
they have
complains.
yeah. Yeah, they've got a mouth on them that the dogs don't seem to have. How is that possible?
Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
but let's shift our focus now to the heart of the matter, that you guys who are using service animals and service humans, so to speak. But can you share experiences like how having a service dog has changed your life and how you see? I mean, we kind of touched a little bit about those fake or maybe not so well trained service animals. How are they impacting the lives of the folks who generally need service animals? So let's start with you, Veronica.
Sure. So you wanted me to tell a little bit about how my service dog helps me. Is that right? Well, I think the best story that encapsulates that is a compare and contrast of before and after using a service dog. So before I started using my service dog, my first service dog, when I would go to the store with Brad, I have agoraphobia, PTSD, and bipolar disorder, and so I would put my head down, hold onto the back of his shirt, and shuffle my feet along behind him. I could not look at anything on the shelves. I couldn't read ingredient labels. I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't pay the cashier. I couldn't do anything. All I could do was just exist in the store, holding onto my husband's shirt and looking at the floor. And when I started training my first service dog, I couldn't be holding on to him. I had to be holding on to the dog. And then I started to notice that as I was more comfortable with my dog helping me, I was able to be further and further away from Brad. So I was able to look at items on the shelves, go to the end of the aisle, go to the next aisle over. My dog eventually helped me get over my fear of paying for things and my fear of driving. And now, I guess gosh, I started using a service dog in 2005. So it's like 19 years later. I am able to drive myself to the grocery store, do my grocery shopping all by myself, pay for my groceries all by myself, come home and not be completely wiped out at the end of all of that. So that is how an example of how service dogs have helped me. And as to the question of how I feel about people fraudulently claiming pets as service dogs, this might be a controversial opinion, but if the animal is well behaved and acting like a service dog, I don't really care that much. I mean, yes, it's illegal and I don't like it. I don't encourage anyone to do it. But if the dog is behaving as a service dog, it doesn't really bother me that much. It's not a danger to me. It's not a danger to my dog. It's not a danger to anyone in the store. The laws for public access are clear. If the animal is disruptive or destructive, they can be kicked out. So if we just follow those laws, everything is good. I don't want to see more restrictive laws, like having to show paperwork to gain entry into a store, because that's just going to harm disabled people. You're still going to have fakers out there who are going to be, making fraudulent certificates and showing them to get in, even if you did require certificates for people. So it's not adding more restrictive policies is not going to help the fraudulent service dog problem, and it's going to hurt disabled people. So the laws that we have now are good, and I just think that we need to just educate people about their rights, educate businesses that if a dog is misbehaving, out of there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, for you to tell me that now I have not known you. We initially met at the dog club, at the dog training club, and Dr. V, I would not have, that story that you just mentioned of not being able to look up or look at the shelves and not drive yourself and feeling exhausted after going shopping. I can't picture that, seeing you at the latest membership meeting, speaking out, asking questions, and adding, hey, I'll help you out if you guys want to have a class to talk about ADA and service laws and that kind of stuff. So this is incredible how that dog has transformed your life. I mean, seriously.
Thank you.
Wow.
Well, I'm 4 dogs into it now.
Okay. All right. Well, there had to be one to start, though.
Yes.
But so, Julie, let's talk about, I mean, as long as I've known you for 20 years at least. So let's talk about how service dogs have changed your life.
Well, the first service dog I actually had 6 of them. Um, literally what happened is I was training a service dog for someone else and trained a bunch of dogs to do bunches of different things that helped me out in my day-to-day life. And then one of my friends said to me, "Hey, Julie, why are you not using a service dog?" And it had never occurred to me. Yes, I have this disability, but it had never occurred to me that a service dog was a thing that could help me out and work for me. It just hadn't occurred to me at all. And so I took one of my better trained dogs, not the one that hauled me upstairs, but a different one, and started training her. Made a huge difference in my life. So in my normal life, I can walk about 100 yards by myself before my nerves start glitching. I have multiple sclerosis, and I'm incredibly blessed in that I was diagnosed in 2000 and I'm still not wheelchair bound yet. Um, I've used a wheelchair a couple of times. I haven't really had to stay with it. I've been really lucky. But even my neurologist has said, I think it's the service dogs that are keeping you moving. And I think they're right. I can walk miles with a service dog. I can walk 100 yards without one. I can walk miles. And basically what happens is they do a momentum pull. Now we don't know the mechanics of why my body doesn't fail at that. I'm glad it doesn't. The theory the theory is that from my neurologist, the theory is that it's kicking in my autonomic nervous system and I take a step to keep from falling. That's what they think is happening because I literally get to a point I cannot initiate forward momentum. I can go up and down all day. I can't go forward. And so my current service dog literally wakes up with me, checks to see how I'm doing at that moment. He will decide whether or not I can walk by myself or not and go to the bathroom. Um, Sometimes he comes with me and sometimes he says, "Nah, you're good." And I mean, and he goes back to sleep because it's 2 a.m. When, it's kind of funny. I mean, there's been times where I've gone to stand up and he says no. And he's big enough. He kind of puts his big head in my stomach and makes me sit down on the bed again. Um, and I think the biggest thing for me was learning to listen to the dog. Um, I, I in the middle of having all the different dogs that I had a Bernese Mountain Dog, which is very different from a Samoyed. And the Bernese Mountain Dogs, if you ask them to do it, they will do it even if they don't think they should. And so I had to learn to, when she said stop, she was only going to say it once. Whereas my Sammys, I can say, yeah, hold on a minute. I can do another minute or two before I need to sit. And the Sammys can figure out, yeah, we need to tell her again. And truly, my Sammys will get mad at me and say, I gave you 3 different chairs. Now you're sitting on this log. You terrible person. You should have sat down earlier. And now all I have to give you is a log, you know, and I'm okay with it. But I mean, but that's where the cognitive disobedience comes in is
Yeah.
they have to say, mom says to keep going. Nope, we ain't going no more,
Well,
and
yeah, you like to tell the story about Loki's grandpa Fish, how he knew
oh
where
yeah.
every bench was at every Walmart
He
that you'd
does.
walk
He
into.
did.
That
He did,
it
and man, when they moved it, he was mad. You don't think of dogs as being particularly angry. He was ticked, deeply
Mhm.
ticked. And then I
Yeah.
saw it up ahead of us closer to the front door, and he's it's and for a Sammy whose whole life is smiling and laughing, I mean, that's one of the good things
Mhm.
about him is they laugh a lot. For
Yeah.
a Sammy to be just perturbed is
Yeah.
is it's pretty humorous. I mean, I'm giggling at him and he's like, "This is
It's not
serious.
funny.
I
No,
can't
I know that.
find a chair." You
And
know?
I know that expression from his grandson, when I had my bouts with anaphylaxis and him actually rescuing me from,
Yeah,
choking in my sleep. Anytime I cough, he gets that look.
yeah,
And I've never seen a Samoyed so angry at something. And it's so weird because he's trying to figure out, where is this coming from and why is it choking my mother? So it's
and and
interesting to see how their brains work.
and I don't even I Fish used to alert me to my asthma before I had any clue. He would say, "Mom, your chest is weaseling, is whistling."
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
a hearing
Yeah.
loss, so I don't necessarily hear it if I can't feel it. And he would literally be like, "Okay, here's the pack. Here's your inhaler. You need this now." And he
Yeah.
woke me
Yeah.
up once doing that. As far as the bench being moved, he brought me all the way back to the office furniture and made me sit on the office furniture because he's like, "I can't find you a chair, Mom." You
They
know,
got him back here. I know where that's
he
at.
knew
But
where it was, so he just
yeah.
is like, "Okay, we're going there now, fast." You
That's
know?
awesome. But so let's talk about if perfect solutions to all this kind of stuff. We're looking at housing, right? So if we're going to talk about what landlords should do, so I'm going to bring Brad into the conversation here and ask, what kind of suggestions do you think that you would make to landlords who really don't understand the whole process with service dogs and emotional support animals and bringing them into their rental homes? What kind of help would look like for them?
I'd be happy to answer that. There is something I want to add to the previous things that we were talking about, though. Um, so I think that people might find this useful to know in the general audience if they're thinking about whether a service dog is right for them or someone they know, because I'm someone who I have myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME for short. Of course, people don't want to say the whole thing. So in order to get around, I'm a power wheelchair user and I have to recline a lot. That's why I'm reclined right now. Um, and so for me, a service dog is not the right decision because I'm not in a position to care for a dog and do all the things that would make it worth it for me to invest all that time and energy, because it takes a lot of time and energy and dedication to train a service dog. So it's not for every single disabled person, but an emotional support animal can help a lot of people out there who don't have the ability to train for the 1 to 3 years of public access training it typically takes to build those psychological shock absorbers, so you can go out without stressing your dog. Because if someone's faking their dog, they might just go out every once in a while and their dog may be really stressed and they don't know it, and that could be bad for everyone. So I just wanted to put that out there. But as far as solutions for landlords for improving the situation, um, so as far as landlords for improving the situation, I would say that it's good to decrease your suspicion, increase your education, and be systematic, consistent, and compassionate in following the law. So landlords are gatekeepers, but they shouldn't be having to play disability police. So, like I think Veronica made clear, you can't tell when someone's disabled, so you can't assume you know their situation. Another of the ways that you can decrease your suspicion, apart from realizing that, is to eliminate incentives for prospective tenants to lie. So if I'm allowed to have my pet and I don't have to pay extra, I have no reason to lie. I'm sure that won't go over well with some people, but I want you to at least think about that. As far as education and being systematic, HUD has their extensive guidance, but it's so complicated that a nonprofit like Psychiatric Service Dog Partners has to get a disabled volunteer like me to digest it and turn it into something that's understandable on that psych.dog/housing. So landlords need to at least use those free resources like ours, both to learn the basics and then to help guide them through the process when it comes to federal laws. Again, we have the flow charts and click through surveys so you can, with each particular situation that comes to you, you can meet that situation and figure it out. Landlords can be more permissive than the law allows. And I always encourage people to be compassionate, especially when it seems like a prospective tenant might need help, but they just don't understand how things work.
Mhm.
But if you know the law and you follow it in a way that you would appreciate if you were on the other side, then you don't have to worry so much about whether you're doing the right thing.
Yep. I think it's the golden rule, isn't it? The
Got it.
baseline of that. So, well, let's talk about those neighbors though. That someone that like their neighbor may have someone that has a service dog or emotional support animal next door. So, being that Julie and Dr. V have actively have service dogs in their lives, can you two share some advice to those who have never seen or rarely encountered a service animal? Let's start with you, Julie.
Oof. That's kind of a big question. Um, for the general public, and especially in my case, one of the things that my dog helps me with is I have a brain injury, together with the MS. So my brain is not functional all the way, all the time. Generally speaking, I'd appreciate it if people just left me alone. Every time you stop me, I have to go back through my list, whether mentally or physically, and start again. I cannot just pick up from where you interrupted me. And I have a beautiful service dog. He's big, he's hairy, he's white, he's groomed, and he smiles. And even just saying, "Hey, your dog is gorgeous." Yeah, he is. Cool. What was I doing? I have no clue. I literally have to start all the way over. And I don't mean to be unfriendly. I'm telling you, if I need to socialize at all, I'm just going to go to Walmart and stand in one spot and we will get lots and lots of socializing done because I can't go 3 minutes without somebody telling me my dog's lovely. I mean, really, really is that. Um, I love the people who smile at me and just keep going. Um, you know, Beautiful dog. Yeah, that's cool. Don't ask me to pet my dog, please. Please, please don't. Um, I will say I do offer sometimes. I mean, if there's someone else who I think could use a little bit of Sammy love and hair, um, I will absolutely, I'll stop for the 4-year-old kid when I have the extra energy to do it. I'll stop for the obviously disabled person who's fallen in love with my service dog. I may stop and say, "Hey, Fred, say hi." And Fred will say hi. Um, sure, I do that, and I do that sometimes. It's been more than 30 years since the ADA has passed. At some point, y'all need to get to the point where you realize that this is now a norm, guys. There's a lot of service dogs out there now. Certainly well more than when I started in 2000 with mine. There are a lot of service dogs out there, And certainly there are people who socialize themselves by letting other people pet their dogs. I wish they wouldn't, just because it makes my life harder. But I'm not gonna say, I mean, other people's disabilities are other people's disabilities. If saying hi works for them, that's cool. It just is hard on me. But I'm not, I mean, I try to be cheerful about it. I mean, the only time I get really upset is when I have an access issue and somebody says, I was at a restaurant about 18 months ago, and they said, we let you have dinner here this time. And my dog was under the table. I mean, because that's where he goes. And, but don't come back here again. And I'm like, I'll be back here tomorrow morning. You know, I'm going to have breakfast here every morning now, you know, because you might want to call your lawyer. You might want to do that. And access issues are terrible. um, they too should know what the law is. Ask me what my dog does for me. Ask me if I have a disability.
Right.
Please,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. The questions are very simple. There's only two you can ask.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and you're right, absolutely right. Julie, the scariest sound or the most annoying sound that I think we can all hear is "oh" from a distance, because you know what's coming.
I know. I
It's,
absolutely
it's
know it's
like,
coming.
and it always happens, like for me, when I'm trying to race the boys for a quick potty and I've got a meeting with a client or something like that, and I hear in the distance, "oh,
Well, and
oh, all
and
right."
and I hate being rude. I mean,
Yeah.
there's that piece in you that, you're brought up and you're told don't be rude.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm
Yeah.
really in a hurry. I can't do this right now.
Right. Right.
That's what I've started doing. I'm really in
Yeah.
a hurry,
Well,
you know.
Dr. V, tell us what about you? What kind of advice would you give to someone who hasn't encountered a service animal or rarely has encountered one?
I also have a very unique looking service animal. I use Japanese Chin as my service dogs. So they're small dogs. They have big, bulgy, googly eyes and a smush nose, and they look very from what most people would expect a dog to look like. So I go to the grocery store, I get stopped 20 times. So my requests to the public are generally the same. If you see a dog that has a vest on, two things: ignore the dog. You can smile at it, but ignore the dog. And number two, treat the handler like you treat everyone else. So if you would normally smile at a random stranger on the street, smile at the person with a service dog. If you would normally ignore a random stranger on the street, ignore the person with the service dog. So treat us like you would treat any other person, ignore the dog. And then finally, if you have a dog and you see a dog with a vest on, then please just give us space. One of the most terrifying things when you have a service dog is your dog being attacked by other dogs. In fact, my second service dog had to be retired early because he was attacked so many times that he became incredibly fearful of other dogs, to the point where I couldn't even walk him in my own neighborhood. He was so terrified to leave the house. And it's just not right that that happens. So if you have a dog, even if your dog is friendly, just please give us space. Go to the other side of the street or pull off the side of the sidewalk and, sit in the grass. Anything to just give that little extra bit of space that will let me breathe easy and know, okay, this person is aware and they're not going to let their dog jump on my service dog and possibly ruin thousands of dollars and many years of training.
Well, and ruin
Wow.
ruin your life for a period of time while you wait
Right.
for the next dog to be trained enough to do that. Yeah. And Japanese
Yeah.
chins are cuter than cute. Little cute Dr. Seuss dogs. I mean, they're so cool. Cool dogs. So I
That
I
is,
bet you get stopped, man.
yeah.
I bet you do.
Wow. Well, you know what? We've uncovered the practice of misrepresenting pets as service animals, and also the best way to help those who do have service animals, and how to accommodate for those with disabilities. This practice of misrepresenting pets is just not a way to save money. It is an illegal practice that impacts people's lives. I have to give a big thank you to our guests, Julie Rydstrand, Dr. Veronica Morris, and Bradley Morris, for sharing their insights. Remember, knowledge is power, and it's our responsibility to ensure the rights of those who genuinely need service animals and emotional support animals are protected. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening episode of Carolina Real Estate Insider. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and happy house hunting.